Okay, good evening, students. I decided to continue on with the lecture as we would not have time in class to do so. So we started to speak about laws affecting discrimination practices. And when we got to the point of family laws protecting persons within family who may need to apply for leave for different reasons. All right, so we would have gotten through that. And now we're going to move on to Uniform Service Employment Act, Re-Employment Rights Act of 1994. What this act does is it strengthens the rights of veterans of the reserves or National Guard to return to the private job sector. So they should not be discriminated against. It also prohibits employers from discriminating against the applicants with prior military service. Because as you know, persons with military service, some of them may have had traumatic life events, and it makes employers skeptical about employing them. So this act protects them. Then we have the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act of 2008. This act, what it does is prohibit discrimination on the based on genetic information such as family history, genetic disease such as breast cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and so on. So depending on the job you go into, you may have to disclose if you have any medical conditions. So what this act does is protect you against discrimination because of some sort of genetic disorder. And it would include hiring decisions, insurance coverage, participation in wellness programs. So it's not just hiring, but it also speaks for persons who you're working for a company and you have a particular disease and they decide not to cover you with insurance. So you're exempted from that healthcare plan, or even to participate in wellness programs. And this act would protect you against that. All right, so these are a few Supreme Court cases that would have taken place. So we have, let's look at firefighters local. Layoffs are permitted by seniority despite effects it may have on minority employees. So that was the actual ruling. So you can go through these individually and see what the ruling was. Once you have a case and a ruling is made by the Supreme Court, it sort of sets a precedent, right, for future cases. So you would hear lawyers saying, referring back to cases and the rulings, because it sets a precedent for future rulings. Preventing discriminatory practices. Uniform guidelines on employee selection procedures. So if you have a uniform guideline and you stick to that, that can help prevent the discriminatory practices. So uniform guidelines on employee selection procedures should outline requirement for employers to prove that they are observing equal employment laws, and HR policies must be made on job-related factors. So you cannot introduce HR policies on non-job related factors, and policies cannot discriminate based on non-related factors. Adverse impact. HR policy or practice has a discriminatory impact on the protected group, right? It may be unintentional. For example, so what we're saying here is in some cases, although it is not intended, HR policies will still have discriminatory impact on protected groups. For example, height. This requirement may discriminate against women and or minorities. And if we go back to the protected group, right, we're not just looking at a particular nation, right? We're not just looking at a particular religion, okay? So you can be discriminated on based on race, religion, color, gender, national origin. So what we're saying here is a person, an HR policy might require, let's say, a person to be 5'8". A lot of women are not 5'8". So unintentionally, they are being discriminated against, right? But it's unintentional discrimination, okay? All right, so you have those policies, it's not intended. Once you can prove that it's not, that's a requirement for the job. Yes, persons may be discriminated against, however, it is not intentional, right? All right, so we're going to go on to the preventing discriminatory practices. 4 tests that may be used to determine if discrimination has potentially occurred. So there's a 4/5 rule, restricted policy, geographic comparison, McDonald drug test, and affirmation plan.